Welcome into UGA Football Live with JC Shelton, where the dogs come to talk.
All right, welcome in everyone. UGA Football Live with JC Shelton. None other than special guest Arthur Lynch, once again returning to talk dogs with me. Appreciate you being on, Arthur. Big win for Georgia, right? It was a statement game for Georgia. I don't really think you can sum it up in a better way. Just an absolute statement against the top 20 team in Athens. Night game, the atmosphere was there. Georgia didn't shy away from the moment. They played really the best that we've seen all year. And I love to see it. I love where this team is growing. And I think, you and I talked about it already for weeks about how we would see the growth eventually because they're too talented. The coaching staff is too talented, and they know what they're doing. They've done it, 2 national championships in a row. They know what they're doing with these guys. We have some young guys in some certain spots that they hadn't been in before, like Carson Beck is the biggest one there, and he played lights out. We'll throw it to you first before I sum up the game. What do you like from the game? I'm sure there's a lot you could talk about. And what are your takeaways maybe moving in here to Vandy and then a bye week?
Yeah, I think you hit on it, right? The theme I think for this that I have for this team, in my opinion, means really nothing. The only opinions that matter are of the guys in that locker room and the coaching staff. But because there's been so much attrition in these past 2 years, because when you win a lot of guys have an opportunity to go to the NFL, and that's kind of the way it is. And when you recruit well, like Kirby does and his coaching staff does, guys fill the vacancies that were left behind by guys who are in the NFL. But those guys that fill those vacancies, they need to not only develop as individual players, but they need to develop as a team, right? And so I think you and I have remained confident in this team and in these guys. But I think from week one, we were like, there's cause for concern, but I always knew that, hey, each week they're getting a little bit better. Each week they're getting a little bit better. Each week they're getting a little bit better. And I think we saw, I don't think that's the peak, right, of what their season is going to be. But I think it gave us a really positive glimpse, let's say, of when you peek into even though we can't really peek into what's going on a daily basis in practice, I think that is like a very good representation of what the coaches probably believe that they have internally, which is a bunch of talented individuals who needed to grow together as a unit. And some guys probably need to grow individually a little bit more than others. And what we saw on Saturday night was, make no mistake, Kentucky's a good team. They got a good quarterback. Mark Stoops is one of the top coaches in the SEC. Anyone that says otherwise doesn't know football. They're physical. They're strong. They've had good teams in the past several years, so I know that they have confidence in themselves. And they went into a hostile environment in Sanford Stadium at 7:00 kickoff. They probably felt confident about their game plan. And what really excited me was whether it was the defense, whether it was the special teams, or whether it was Carson Beck in that offense, and obviously Brock Bowers again. I just think we met the moment, and I think silenced a lot of naysayers that may have been creeping out of the woodwork a little bit. And if I were to guess, we will probably see continued growth in this football team moving forward. Not to say that there's not an opportunity for other challenges down the road in the regular season. Not to say that we should be that they should be thumping their chest, thinking that they are the number one team in the country, even though that's what the rankings say. They still have a lot to prove, and I think they know that. But I think that was a huge step forward for them as a team. That's what excited me the most, because when every single season is its like own living organism, right? And that team, like, no matter what the team, good teams, bad teams, average teams, like each football team, and you know this from playing in high school, it doesn't matter the level. It's like where you start in preseason camp, and where you end, the before and after, if you could like do a before and after picture, which you really can't because it's really all the same faces, same people, but you know the difference in the makeup of those teams over the course of the season, right? And I think when you're talking about stages of growth through the season, that was a really big statement for us. That makes sense.
That makes sense. And I think one thing is Kirby Smart, we know his teams get better throughout the year. And that's just a statement. That's a statement win, and it's something that we've seen Kirby Smart teams do, especially in the last 2 years. You always have your up and downs, just like last year. The fan base and football fans alike always or maybe a little bit in the moment for me. When you're really considering, what the postseason will shape out like, where these guys will end up in, and it includes every team, not just Georgia, but Georgia's certainly one of those, especially the top team and coming off back-to-back titles. I don't think you can get caught up on the week-to-week as much as what the goals are out for the end of the season. And I think a statement win like this really instill confidence, not only the players in themselves and each other, but also the coaching staff, tells them they're doing the right things, right? Because maybe they had some talks with them. It's like, hey, are we doing this the right way? Are we doing this the right way? Do you think this will work out? And they went into a really good team. Like you said, Kentucky's a good team. And, we'll definitely see how they finish out the year to give us a little barometer on what that win was. But right now they were undefeated going into that game. And they have a tough schedule ahead as well, just like all over the SEC they do, especially Vanderbilt coming up. Their schedule after Georgia is really tough as well. But that's SEC ball. I look at this game and Carson Beck and his growth, very impressed with him. I've been impressed with him throughout the offseason, and I was really hoping we see a game like this. And I know last week he was good as well. But coming into this Kentucky game, this is where we needed to see it, because we knew that Kentucky was going to put really all their cards out on stopping that Georgia run to make him one-dimensional and him have to hit shots. And in the past, those first half struggles against Auburn and South Carolina, the big plays weren't made. Georgia missed out on some. And that's kind of, it made the score closer than it should have been. And in this game, they didn't get a chance on that. We didn't see a sluggish start in this game, which we've seen several times this year. We didn't see that at all. Carson had 300 yards passing at the half. He was 13 of 13 at one point, which is like third all time for Georgia in completions in a row. And ended the game with 4 touchdowns. He had a pick, but he was SEC co-offensive player of the week. Nationally, I think he's getting a lot of attention as well. And I think that's, when you look at other teams and what they thought about Georgia, okay, they lost 10 players plus more from last year. You come into this year, you have the chance to be the first team since 1930, Minnesota to three-peat. So it was really only the quarterback for Georgia that was the question, all things considered. And I think how Carson is playing right now, Georgia's going to be there in the postseason. They really are. I think I don't see an SEC team right now. We talked about that growth, and I liked Alabama last week. I liked how they played against A&M. I thought they would beat A&M. A lot of people were taking that A&M line. I like Jalen Milroe. I think he played good against A&M. That defense is flying around for Bama now. They look like a much better team. And how do you think Nick Saban and Kirby Smart do this? They've been around the same. They coach kind of the same. Their teams get better. So I expect Alabama to be there at the end. But, look at this Kentucky game, the run game. Kentucky really sold out to stop it. Didn't work out. Georgia hit the plays. Carson had maybe one of the best balls I've seen this year out of all quarterbacks to Marcus Rosemy-Jackson for that touchdown. It was incredible. Perfect ball placement, took a hit, threaded the needle. Marcus did not have to slow down at all. I thought that was very impressive. I remember that one for sure. Brock Bowers, again, is just incredible. And the rest of the tight end room got some playing time. Oscar Delp, we've seen a lot of him, but the 2 freshman tight ends have been hurt. They got in and they played. So I think that's good to get those guys worked out in case something happens with the depth. We know depth is a big concern in the latter part of the season. Just part of football, right? So you never know who's going to go down, and that's hurt teams in the past. Georgia has overcome that the last 2 seasons, but it's something to watch for sure. Georgia's really deep at some places and really not at others. But I think defensively as well, when you look at that, right, because we talked about this run defense, that was the big story all week, was Georgia allowed 209 to Auburn. Kentucky's coming in here off of 329 at Florida. What are they going to do? Is Georgia going to get run over here? 55 yards rushing for Kentucky. I mean, that
Mhm.
was very impressive to me. It just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? You don't just walk out there and that happens. That takes work, physicality, and Georgia showed up and stopped that so well. So if you can't make Georgia's defense one dimensional, as in you can stop one or the other things, and you can excel in the run if they're defending the pass, what have you. If Georgia can stop the run like this for the rest of the season, Artie, no one's going to move the ball on Georgia defense. They might move inside the 20s, but it's not going to be a lot because that pass defense is the best in the country. Statistically,
Mhm.
athlete wise, guys who have experience. I, I mean, how do you beat Georgia like that? I mean, their offense, the weapons they have, you're not going to stop them all game. You might have your quarters here and there, but that defense is just not going to give out. And what we've learned from Georgia's defense over the past 2 seasons, especially, is you have to be able to run and pass. We talked about it last week. I brought up Ohio State, how they really stretched Georgia's defense out with that pass game, and you had NFL players on that offense, right? Look at the rest of the country. Let's say USC Caleb Williams, they would threaten passing wise, but they are not the team that's going to be Georgia because their offense is so bad. I mean, their defense is so bad. So it's like I don't see a team in college football right now and an offense who could stretch Georgia in both ways. So I think that's really good for Georgia when you think about the postseason implications. Artie, what say you on that and how this Georgia defense is just I don't know how you tackle.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as say I don't see a team. I think there are several teams that have a balanced attack that I think could pose problems for Georgia. I think some obvious ones are Oregon. I know, and again, everyone's a big look. We did to them last year,
I was going to bring up
and
Oregon.
I
I'll
said,
stop you right there. I was going to bring
eh,
up Oregon to give you somebody to talk about. I'll just tell you the stats. Keep going.
eh,
Oregon and Georgia are the only two teams in top 10 in both offense and defense.
yeah, and everyone's like, well, yeah, last year, and I'm just like, if you're talking about last year, then you're living in the past, and it's time to move on. You know, people like to make fun of Harbaugh. I get it. Michigan's a good football team. Everyone's like, well, they didn't play anybody. Well, guess what? They've been. I think they're 20s. There's probably only one team in the past few years that has a better record than them, and that's Georgia. But Michigan is a very good football team. They can run the ball. McCarthy is very athletic. I think Penn State. I've been saying it all year. I think Penn State's a good football team. Their defense is strong. They have very good running backs. That guy Aller's legit. So I do think there are teams out there, but we're not going to see any of those teams unless it's the playoff. So if we're talking about here and now, right? If we're talking about what we saw on Saturday and what we have to do moving forward to get the opportunity to play one of those teams or potentially play one of those teams, I like where we stand, right? You hinted on it a little bit with Alabama. I think Alabama. I don't know what Nick Saban said to his team at the halftime of the Ole Miss game, but he probably should have said it to him, halfway through camp. But it doesn't matter. They look good. Oklahoma, they hired the right man in that for that job because their defense looked very good. Obviously, bent a little bit in the second half, but they held their line and won the game. But again, back to Georgia, right? Brock Bowers, arguably, if not the best football player in the country. Whether or not he'll be in New York, he's getting a lot of hype because he's played well on national TV stages so far this year. If he continues on that trend, I would be shocked to see him in New York. I hate to burst the bubble of fans. He's probably not going to win the award just because that's the nature of the beast. But trust me, I would love nothing more as a former Georgia tight end for him to win the award. So fingers crossed. But when your playmakers are making those types of plays in these types of games, and your quarterback plays at an elite level, and yes, he played at an elite level on Saturday. I think everything you say is warranted. I think Georgia has a very, very strong case as a potential three-peat, right? There's a lot of football left to be played. People are giving up on Tennessee. I think that's misguided. I think Missouri is a team that's growing. When we talk about growth, I think Missouri probably should have won that LSU game. Jaden Daniels decided to be a magician. But there are some teams on our schedule left. Ole Miss is another one. Like, we have so many mountains to climb in order to get where we want to go. But I think all things being equal, were the concerns and the cries and the irrational concerns from the Georgia fan base that were being launched at Mike Bobo, that were being launched at Carson Beck. Long season to go, but I think we can quell some of those concerns, at least for today. So I'm pretty excited about the outcome. But I definitely think, we have a long way to go as a football team. And again, I say we as if I'm on the team. I am not, obviously, but I think there's a long way to go. But you got to be feeling good about where we stand after Saturday. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, so it was a good chance to three-peat before the season, and now it's even better chance, in my opinion, to three-peat right now. When you look at the whole state of college football and the lack of balanced teams. I mean, we talked about Oregon, we'll see what they're made of against Washington. I'm not even a big believer in Washington like that. Sure, I love Penix, but, how are they going to play against – I don't know. I'm just not a believer.
The counter argument too is if we're an opposing fan or opposing media member who's a homer for another team making the case against Georgia, you could argue, well, yeah, Carson Beck has done well, but their running game is not what it has been in the past 5 years. They don't have the Nick Chubb, they don't have the Swift, they don't have the Holyfield, they don't have the Gurley. Now, I don't think that's warranted. I think we're going to be a running back room by committee. And we have a great offensive line, so you can put kind of like anybody back there toting the rock, and they're going to be able to gain some yards. But I'm with you. I think I like where we stand, but I know what Mike Bobo and Will Muschamp and Kirby Smart are saying. Well, I can guess what they're saying. My goes like, "Hey, big win, proud of you guys."
Oh yeah,
it's on to the next one. On to the next one, right? Like, we have so much more that we can do to become an elite football team.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think, listen, I'm just talking about it right now. I don't think that they think what I'm thinking, for sure. I'm just trying to get a good idea and predict kind of what I think is going to happen. And I think you have to be balanced to beat this team. And I don't see it. I really don't, in the SEC, at least. Every team has
SEC, I agree.
Every team has a better unit than the other, and it's a pretty wide margin right now, except Alabama. They are floating right there. They're a little bit more balanced, but everybody else, Ole Miss, defense, LSU, defense. Both of those offenses are pretty good. Even Missouri, and Missouri outplayed LSU that entire game. Made me sick to my stomach because I would have loved to see Missouri walk away with that win, right? And their defense could not stop them at the end. And then the pick, I mean, they were just fighting for points at that point. I think, that say what you will about that. But the balance here, you have to be balanced to beat this team. I don't see it, especially in Tennessee, covering Tennessee for the Players Lounge a bit this year. I know that roster pretty well right now, and they don't have the guys. They're lacking a lot of depth. The run game, they're the best running team in the SEC right now. And in Josh Heupel's offense, that's not a good thing. They're having to win games doing that. They don't have the receivers. Their leading receiver just got hurt for the year, right? So they have an Oregon transfer coming in to try to provide a spark as well. He hasn't played much. He's coming back from an injury from last week. Dante Thornton. He transferred it. Listen, he transferred in his offseason. But
okay, I was like, wait, what's going on?
Yeah, dude, he hopped over. Yeah, they flew him out. From Eugene.
Halfway through, he took his midterms. Was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah, no. So they need him to step up, bigger guy, but they don't have the receivers. And Joe Milton, bless him, great arm, can run.
Yeah, I'm not sold on Milton.
He's going to have to play so well for them to end the season the way they want to. But you talk about Missouri has a matchup with Kentucky this weekend. That's going to be interesting at Kentucky. How does that shake out? Does Missouri have another loss when they come to Georgia? And Ole Miss,
part of me likes Missouri there. I don't know though. I don't know. I'm always high on Kentucky, even though I shouldn't be as high as I am on them. But anyway, go ahead.
It is going to be that road game for Missouri coming off a really tough loss, but they are well coached.
Totally agree.
Pretty well matched teams, in my opinion. Right? I mean, they play good defense. They play out sound defense. They play physical, except when LSU torches Missouri in the second half. But Kentucky doesn't have an offense like that, so I think it's going to be a close game. But let's get back into this here. We'll talk a little Georgia. So let's get to history class with Artie Lynch. Guys, this is from our live show. We had to record this week because life happens. But this is from our live show, something we do on Tuesdays at 8 Eastern. Arthur provides us with a little history class in college football because we love college football, the pageantry, the atmospheres, the energy around it. So we love a little history, a little look back to this week or this day in time from the past. Take it away, Artie.
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago when I was looking through some articles for kind of this segment for like late September. And again, these dates always don't match up specifically, but I came across this article. It's pretty interesting. It has nothing to do with Georgia, but it does have to do with the history of college football. And as someone that studied, and I've mentioned this before, so people that have listened, I apologize for reiterating, but I was a history major at University of Georgia. I did my senior thesis on the desegregation of sports in the SEC and then ultimately desegregation of football team at UGA. Was able to interview the late, great Vince Dooley one-on-one to talk about those 5 pioneers of the University of Georgia football team to kind of, break that color barrier. And so, I was surfing the net and I came across this New York Times article, which I thought was pretty interesting. It was in October 11th, 1947. And the Harvard Crimson team was traveling to University of Virginia to play a football game. And one thing that always kind of gives me nostalgia about this time period is 2 of my great uncles, my grandfather's brothers, were killed in World War II in 1944. They were kind of part of the inspiration for my own kind of journey into the military. But a lot of these players ended up, when I say these players, on this University of Virginia and Harvard football team, served in the war. So think about how unique of a time this was. Served World War II, left college to serve, came back, finished their college careers, and finished as football players. 2 of them, the 2 captains, Ken O'Donnell for Harvard and the captain for University of Virginia, actually served in the Navy together. And this is kind of a long story of the captain of the Harvard football team. There was rumors, and they weren't rumors at all. They ended up being true, that Harvard had a 2-way starting offensive defensive lineman named Chester Pierce. Chester Pierce would go on to be a Harvard professor, got his medical doctorate and a medical degree as a psychiatrist, taught at Harvard for 30 years. But he was the first African-American to play against an all-white Southern school in the history of college football. The year prior, there was 2 African-American players on University of Nevada, and they were going to play Mississippi State, and Mississippi State canceled the game because they didn't want to play Nevada. They didn't want to host Nevada and their 2 African-American players. And so obviously there was a ton of outside noise, right? There was players, or there was like politicians from Virginia and politicians from Harvard, and everyone was making a huge deal out of it. But it was Chester Pierce who said, he goes, I'm just here to play football. Like, let's just go down there and play. And it was the 2 captains. The captain of Harvard wrote the captain of Virginia. They had served together in the military, and the captain of Harvard was like, hey, we have an African-American player. He started us 2 years. He either plays or none of us play. And every single, the captain of the University of Virginia football team took a poll. Every single player on that UVA team said, we don't care if he's black, blue, orange, yellow, or from Mars or whatever. It was, football is football. And sure enough, they went down, played the game, and Chester Pierce, first African-American player to kind of play a college football game in the Deep South, would go on to be a doctor, teach at Harvard, practice medicine for 30 years at Mass General. And I just thought it was a really cool story that, obviously October 11th, 1947 was the game. That was however many years ago yesterday. But to just kind of see that there's always this outside noise, right? And I think a lot of this story can be, there's a lot of parallels to today. And you hear these public officials, or no matter what your politics are, there's always this outside noise, right? And people want to tell us how many problems are going on or what problems are going on in our society. But at the end of the day, it was a bunch of guys from Virginia and a bunch of people from the Northeast. All they wanted to do was play football. They didn't care what people looked like. They just said, hey, let's line up and play. Your teammates are your brothers. Our teammates are our brothers. Some of these guys served together to defeat the Nazis, which is just a crazy kind of humbling thing to read, right? And I thought that was a really cool story. You see everything that kind of goes on in our day-to-day lives, and we think about all the problems that we think are affecting us, but in reality, for these guys, 1947 didn't matter the color of anybody's skin. They're like, let's just line up and play ball and have ourselves a game, and they're able to do it. They made history, and I just thought that was really cool. So that's my history class for today. Chester Pierce was the guy's name, and Ken O'Donnell, who is the captain of that Harvard team, ended up being John F. Kennedy's chief of staff when JFK went to the White House. So little history there. I'll tweet out the article when we post this, but thought it was pretty cool.
I love that. Thank you, Arthur. That's a good story, man. Story time. I like it.
That's story time, man.
That's an incredible story, especially with all the connections with like being a Harvard professor as well as JFK's chief of staff for two different guys. That's crazy. That's awesome.
Yeah, man. It's just and the fact that two captains, like, what are the chances that they served together, they survived the war, they get out, and they're like, oh, by the way, we're playing each other in like 2 years. You know what I mean? Just like, I don't know, different time for sure. But I always appreciate stories like that.
Yeah, another reason we love college football, folks. It's the best.
No question.
All right. Let's get into Vandy here. So, Georgia travels to Nashville this Saturday. Vandy's 2-5 on the year. Georgia has a bye next week, and then Jacksonville, the big world's largest outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville.
One of the best.
One of the best. Can't wait to talk about that one. But that said, this has really almost every ingredient of being a trap game for Georgia. Noon kickoff, which is in Vandy, right? So like 11 local, something like that.
Oh, dude, it's the worst.
And that's what I'm getting into. That's what I'm getting into, Artie.
It's so bad.
So I
I
listened to Ben Jones, Tavares King, Noshawn Marino, Aaron Murray wrote a story on their conversation today for the Players Lounge. They talked about it and their experiences with Vanderbilt. It's really funny, guys. If you want to check it out, go subscribe. It's pretty cheap to watch or read it. And the key one word thing I took away from that was lackluster playing at Vanderbilt, especially the early kicks. They said there's no juice, no energy. Artie, tell us what it's like to play at Vandy.
It's really hard to describe. And mind you, I was there when James Franklin was the coach. And James Franklin obviously is, JC, you give me crap for liking Penn State, but he's obviously now the Penn State head coach. And he had a little thing going at Vandy there for a bit. I mean, I think he won back-to-back seasons, 9-win games, which is, comparatively speaking, is like winning a national championship at Vandy.
Did you lose to him?
We lost in my senior year because they called, for a number of reasons. We didn't play well, but an atrocious targeting call on Ramik Wilson on a fourth down would have sealed the game.
They called the targeting back, but then still penalized 15 yards, so it won the game. It was
anyway. Yeah. So, and that really kind of killed our season because we had 2 SEC losses, and anyway. So we were actually kind of up for that game a little bit more than we probably were, but there's a game. So I think we beat them 3 times I was there. Lost my senior year, but my freshman year. So I played as a true freshman and then redshirted as a sophomore. And this is probably the game that TK, Ben Jones, and Murray are talking about. It was 2009. Kind of like a cold, overcast day. We ended up winning the game, but Vandy was god awful. I mean, like, awful. And we go, and it was just like, I think it was like 7-7 or 14-7 going into the fourth quarter, and couldn't run the ball. We ended up running like fullback dive 12 times in a row with Fred Munzenmeyer just to move the ball down the field. But to your point, and to what these guys, and I have not read the article, so forgive me, but lackluster is the right way to put it. And the coaches all week are like, trying to ride our ass like 24/7 to like they're basically punishing us, knowing full well that we're gonna come out flat. and it's like it's weird because like put it this way, basically 2011 and 2012 minus Gurley, we had Crowell instead of Gurley, but the team at its core was very similar, right? And we played Vandy in 2011 night game, their place, and it went down to the wire. I think we won by like 3 points. They blocked the punt. We ended up like recovering it. It was a mess, but we won the game. But it was like a nail biter. Fast forward the next year, we play at Sanford Stadium. We come out with our hair on fire, and I think we won like 45-7. And so there's something that's cursed about that stadium in Nashville. It's dreary, like it's kind of 30. It's a small stadium. The locker room's crowded. There's no noise. The fans aren't into it, and you're just like you almost feel like you're being punished for playing there. And I know that's so messed up to say about Vandy,
Truth.
but it's like you think about like they just beat a top 25 or top 20 opponent at home, Sanford Stadium, 96,000 people, your number one team in the country, back-to-back national champions, the red lights that you see on my back screen, like you can't get a better environment. Then you're like, we're going to Vanderbilt. The stadium's under construction. Nobody's going to be there. We need you to come with the same energy from last week. It's physically impossible, right? Like, I don't care if you're under like a Harry Potter spell. You are going to come out flat. So I think the right words were just lackluster performance and an underwhelming atmosphere, and it's a recipe for disaster every time. Thankfully for us, I thought this Vandy coach had the ship going in the right direction. They lost to Hawaii, I'm pretty sure, this year, or lost to it in.
They beat Hawaii, Alabama, A&M, and then they've lost 5 straight. Wake Forest, UNLV, Kentucky, Missouri, Florida.
So I was expecting them to beat those. That's right, UNLV and Wake Forest. And I like the coach. I think he's a good energy guy, but I don't think he's been able to recruit. And Franklin could recruit some players, and he plucked some guys from Georgia that, they weren't 5 stars, but they were guys with Georgia offers. So he had some dudes that could make plays. So fortunately for us, I think we could pretty much knock it off the bus in the first half and still win by 21, right? Yeah. But I think that's just because they don't have the players, and that just comes down to recruiting. So underwhelming atmosphere, lackluster performance. Those would be the 2 like adjectives or whatever I would use to describe what it's like playing in Nashville, which is unfortunate because Nashville is a great city.
Yeah. Jones mentioned that. So Jones is funny. I was laughing when I was listening.
Well, he's a character.
Yeah, he's so funny. Just a country boy. So I understand his language because I am too.
I'll tell you a funny story about me and Ben Jones after this.
Yeah.
We can do it online.
I'll throw it to you. But what he said was basically, no one's there. You walk into the stadium and no one has got there yet. So whoever's going to be there has not even got there yet, because they're all hungover from being on Broadway, whatever street you call it in Nashville. Yeah, so they says they show up late, they have no energy because they're hungover, and then usually you don't play as well. So imagine playing in a MAC stadium at noon, but in the SEC. That's what Vanderbilt on the road is. And so I can only imagine how you're not going to have that adrenaline like you had against not even close. You have energy, maybe. Yeah, if you're locked in, you'll have energy, but you're not going to have that adrenaline hit. But what was that story about Jones?
So obviously I'm from we belabored the point. I'm from Massachusetts, and when you don't play in a New Year's Six Bowl, which we did not. We played in it was like a New Year's Eve Bowl or something. Independence Bowl my freshman year against A&M. Von Miller was on that team. Gerard Johnson was the quarterback, and Mike Sherman was the head coach.
Oh, that was a game.
Ryan Tannehill was the wide receiver on that team. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. So you finish up bowl practice, and then the holidays, most guys go home, right? And they drive home, no matter where they're from. But I wasn't going to fly back home, buy a flight because there's no NIL money back then. Buy a flight, fly back, and then drive to Shreveport or whatever. So Ben just kind of this is the type of guy he is. He kind of saw that I didn't really have anywhere to go, and he was just like, "Hey man, you want to come to Christmas at my house?" And I was like, "Yeah, I have nowhere else to go." And so it was me, Keontae Tripp, Dontavius Jackson, Brandon Harton, I think, and Tavares. I don't even think TK was there. I think it was maybe Rhett McGowan. No. It was just Brandon Harton, myself, Keontae Tripp, Dontavius Jackson, and then obviously Ben. And we went to Bibb County, Alabama. Okay. I mean, I'm on Mars, right? We go to and we're going there, and I had never shot a gun before. And Ben's like, "Hey, we're going to the farm." And I'm like, "All right, we're going to the farm." And we stopped at Walmart first for something. And all these random people come up to us like, "You guys play Alabama football?" We're like, "No, we play at Georgia." They're like, "There's this boy from Bibb County. He plays at Georgia." And we're like, "Yeah, Ben Jones." And they're like, "Yeah, hometown hero. He should have went to Alabama," all this stuff. And so we go to his house for dinner, Christmas Eve dinner. And Ben's like, "Are you hungry?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm hungry." He's like, "All right, we're eating quail." I'm like, "What's quail?" He's like,
so good.
"We're getting fried quail." I was like, "Are we going to buy it? What's?" And he's like, No. They killed it. This is from the yard. And he's got this big plot of land, and they had hunted the fried quail. We had the fried quail. We were with the whole Jones family. The next day, we go to his farmhouse. So he's got his main house, and they go to this other plot of land. There's a farmhouse. And we just take out a bunch of guns, and he's like, "There's one rule, just don't point it at the road." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Yeah, just don't shoot at the road. You're good to go. Shoot wherever else you want." And you got to put into context. I've only been in the South for 6 months. And Athens ain't the South. You know what I mean? Athens is this college town, bubble that's a fantasy for college kids. I remember calling my mom on Christmas Eve, and I was like, "Mom, I'm officially in the South." I was like, "This is it." I was like, "I'm in Alabama." And she was like, "What's it like?" I was like, "Nicest people in the world, awesome food." But I couldn't, I was like, I could send you a radio signal. You couldn't find me if I sent you a GPS signal. You know what I mean? I am in the South. Finished the drive, went to Shreveport, beat Texas A&M on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve. But I'll never forget Ben Jones just looking at me like, "Yeah, just don't shoot at the road, especially if cars come by." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not going to shoot an oncoming car with a 12-gauge shotgun, my guy, but I appreciate the warning." So
Hey,
that was my first time in Alabama. That was with Ben Jones and the Jones family. So thank you, Mrs. Jones. Thank you, Ben, for that hospitality back in 2009.
I love that story. Yeah, you make sure to speak up when I mention somebody else's story on. I love it, dude. Yeah, so
right.
Georgia's the deep South. That is deep South. That's extra deep South, baby. I love it, dude. I've definitely been told not to shoot at the road before. All right, let's get into a little prediction time here, Georgia Vandy. So something to note: Vanderbilt has not scored a touchdown against Georgia since 2018 in the fourth quarter.
I saw that stat. Time. That's insane.
1,800 and an odd number of days since they scored a touchdown. That includes 2 straight shutouts last 2 seasons. And that's after Georgia lost a record number of NFL draft picks. Didn't matter, right? And they actually beat Florida last year and Kentucky last year. So we still shut them out. Look, Georgia has that number. All right. And they were able to overcome the noon kick. We talked about Vanderbilt, the atmosphere, all the the issues that kind of go into getting your psyche up for this game, they still crushed them 50-5 the last time they went to Vandy. Spread is 31.5. Georgia's relatively healthy going into this game. Vanderbilt, A.J. Swan played most of the time at quarterback. He's not going to be in this week. It's Seals. And he's played a little bit better than A.J. But Georgia's relatively healthy going into this one. Marvin Jones Jr., outside linebacker. We need depth there. I've noticed that, but he should be back in. He played 5 snaps last week. Kendall Milton looks good. Ladd McConkey had a catch for 11 yards. I don't think Georgia wanted to use him as much because of the score deficit there last week. Other than that, I think Georgia's the healthiest they've been since fall camp. I mean, Amarius Mims is working his way back. We mentioned the 2 tight ends, the freshmen who came in, and Pierce Sperlin and Lawson Lucky. So that's good for the Dogs. You know, I wrote an article for USA Today that talks about the 5 reasons why Georgia covers. I'm really convinced, doing the research and writing that Georgia does cover this 31.5. If it was literally any other team, or any other team, I don't care if it's UAB, Alabama, A&M, whoever, I would probably not even touch 31.5. But if it's Vandy, the way Georgia played, I like 31.5. I think Georgia covers. Give me 48-0. I think they'll goose egg them again. I would never even say that Georgia would shut out UAB or who have you. Like, I would never say that. I think 48-0 Georgia gets the win, and they go into this bye and get healthy, hopefully come out strong against the Gators.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. And JC, like the one thing that I think that makes, well, let me rephrase. There are many things that make Kirby Smart such a fantastic football coach, but one of the reasons that I love watching his teams play is similar to the reasons why I love watching, Nick Saban's teams play, because the teams that they're supposed to blow out, they blow out. You know what I mean? Like, they don't let and I think a lot of that goes into the preparation of the week, reminding his team that they need to constantly seek improvement and hit that standard of excellence. Now everyone's like, well, they should have blown out Auburn. They shouldn't blow out South Carolina. No, they shouldn't have, right? Those are SEC games, rivals. That's just the nature of the league. But I think if you look at, I mean, you said the stat yourself, what, been 1,000+ days?
1,800.
That was Donald Trump's second year in office. We're now in the third year of President Biden. That's a long freaking time. You know what I mean? Like, the presidents have changed out since Alabama scored a touchdown, since Vandy scored a touchdown. Never mind beating Georgia. And I think that has a lot to do with the type of standard that has been put in place and built up from Kirby Smart and his staff. And I'll be the first to admit, right? And this is probably why the Mark Rook era came to a close, and I was part of that era, and I love that. I love him to death, and I am part of the reason, because I was a player there and ultimately a captain at Georgia, that there was times when we struggled to go into these types of games and just establish dominance, even though when we were the superior opponent, right? And I think Kirby and his team do a really good job of that. So to your point, I can't see. I'll give them 3 points, right? Maybe they don't get a goose egg, but I think it's like 48-3, and I think it's going to get ugly quick, because I think the offense and Carson Beck, and I know Mike Bobo's be like, okay, we just had a game. We are now humming a little bit. Let's step on people's throats, particularly against opponents that we know we can't step on their throat early. So I think it's like a 48-3. I bet you it's like 28-0 at halftime.
Yeah. I like the first half line is probably going to be set at 16 maybe. So I might take that if you guys are invested. And then Artie and I both like the under at 56, because Vandy's just not going to score enough points. And I don't think Georgia we know Georgia's going to get plenty of play from backup quarterbacks, Brock Vanderbilt, Gunnar Stockton, backup running backs, what have you, all across the field on defense as well. There'll be a lot of backups in, and Georgia's going to see some stuff for them in game. Very valuable opportunity in that space. But Artie, I think that's it. It's a good place to leave off. I appreciate you joining. Hopefully it's another win for the Bulldogs. I think it will be. And we'll be back next week. We'll talk a little Florida. Maybe we'll do it part 1, part 2 preview. We'll talk a little Gators next week and talk a little college football. Some good matchups this weekend, guys. Oregon, Washington. It's a good one to watch.
Who do you before we go, who do you got now?
Give me Oregon, baby. Give me Oregon, man.
I think physical. So too. I've been following Dan Lanning closely. It just kind of like listening just to kind of hear to see what kind of like coach he is and what he's building over there. He's the real deal. He's the real deal.
Yeah, exactly. Another one from that Saban tree, baby, and Kirby Smart.
And Kirby tree.
Yeah, exactly. Get it right. You're right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. Make sure to follow us along the Pulse Sports Network on YouTube. If you're watching, please subscribe, and then everywhere you get your podcasts every week. We appreciate you, Artie. Go Dogs, man.
Go Dogs.